The acting Navy Secretary submitted his resignation today, Mobley. Why did that become necessary, and what role did you have in this, sir?
Well, I had no role in it. I've heard, I don't know him, but I've heard he was a very good man. And the whole thing was a very unfortunate. The captain should not have written a letter. He didn't have to be Ernest Hemingway. He made a mistake, but he had a bad day. And I hate seeing bad things happen. Man made a mistake. But, you know, you shouldn't be writing letters, and you're in the military. You're the captain of a great ship, and you shouldn't be writing letters and sending them to many people. And then it gets out to the media. And, you know, the question is, how did it get out to the media? So there's a lot of bad things happened there. And I had heard he did because he didn't want to cause any disturbance for our country. So that was because he wouldn't have had to resign. I would not have asked him. I don't know him. I didn't speak to him. But he did that, I think, just to end that problem. And I think in really many ways that was a very unselfish thing for him to do.
What should happen now to Commander Crozier, who left?
Well, they're going to look at that. I think the Secretary of Defense, as you know, is Mark Esper, and he's very capable. And I think he's looking at that right now. They're going to just take it under regular Navy channels to see what they want to do. But he made a mistake, but he shouldn't have done that. And your secretary probably shouldn't have said quite what he said. He didn't have to resign, but he felt it would be better for the country. So I think it will end it quickly. Yes, please.
So, Mr. President, a couple on the economic front. The $250 billion that was added today, or will be added for the small business loan program, brings it to $600 billion in total. Do you think that figure is enough? Might there need to be more down the line?
You know, when you see hundreds of thousands of applications, don't forget they're for $3,000, for $7,000, some for a couple of million. I guess one of the banks said a couple of million. So they're for different, very varying amounts of money. And there's a limit on the top, and then there's really no limit on the bottom as to what it might be. But it's really popular. It's hundreds of thousands of applications. They really like it. What I like is it keeps these companies together, these little companies. Just like we're going to help the airlines and the big companies, we're going to help the little companies. And the banks are running. Nobody's equipped to do a thing like that, but the banks are equipped. So the banks are doing it. Big banks, small banks. We have many banks, community banks. And they're processing the loans, and they'll be able to watch it and make sure it's done properly.
Talk today, sir, as well about potentially reopening the economy in the upcoming weeks. You mentioned the other day about a potential economic task force. Can you give us some sort of update as to where that may or may not?
We're thinking about that, but we want to open up, and we want to get it open soon. That's why I think maybe we're getting to the very top of the curve. I spoke with Governor Cuomo, and he seems to think that he's getting close, and I think a lot of people think that a lot of places are getting close. We want to start hitting the downside, and I think we're going to be doing. This is going to be a very difficult week, however. This week will be a very difficult week because that's the most difficult week when you're at that top position, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
It does open up. What can the federal government do?
Well, the federal government has done a lot, and it's going to do a lot. We want to. I really think that with the stimulus, we can be maybe even beyond. We're going to do perhaps infrastructure, which you wouldn't have gotten approved before, and now people are looking to do it. And the beauty is we're paying zero interest, or very close to zero interest. In some cases, we're paying actually zero, have no interest charge. And the dollar is very strong, and people are investing in the dollar. They want, the fact that we have the strong currency. We have the currency. Our currency is everything. And other companies, other countries want to be in our currency. So we're getting all of the investment wanting to come into the dollar. The dollar is the strength. The dollar is the whole ballgame. We have a strong dollar. Other currencies are going down, way, way down in some cases. You look at other countries, I won't mention them, but other countries are going down 22%, 25%, 28%, and it's very hard for them. That makes it much more difficult. With us, our currency is relatively now stronger than it ever was, or it was over the last few years relative to other countries. It's always relative to other countries, but our currency is very strong. So therefore, people want to invest if we do a bond issue to do infrastructure, everybody wants a piece of that issue, even at zero interest. Yeah, please.
Did you see these memos that reportedly Peter Navarro wrote back in January? When did you see them, and how does these memos sort of square with what you've often said that nobody could have predicted this? It sounds like he was predicting.
I didn't see him, but I heard he wrote some memos talking about pandemic. I didn't see him. I didn't look for him either. But that was about the same time as I felt that we should do it. That was about the same time that I closed it down. I asked him about it just a little while ago because I read something about a memo. I said, "Did you do a memo?" I didn't see it. I didn't ask him to show it to me. He said, "Yes, I talked about the possibility of a pandemic." Nobody said it's going to happen, but there is a possibility. There always has been a possibility, but people wouldn't talk about it. But it was right about the time that I closed it down. And interestingly, the World Health Organization was not in favor of us closing it down. And if we didn't close it down, we would have lost hundreds of thousands more lives. So we did a good thing. Yeah.
So at the time, though, when Peter Navarro did circulate those memos, you were still downplaying the threat of coronavirus in the U.S. You were saying things like, "I think it's a problem that's going to go away within a couple of days."
It will go away.
You said within a couple of days the cases will be down to 0.
Well, the cases really didn't build up for a while, but you have to understand, I'm a cheerleader for this country. I don't want to create havoc and shock and everything else, but ultimately, when I was saying that, I'm also closing it down. I obviously was concerned about it because I closed down our country to China, which was heavily infected. I then closed it down to Europe. That's a big move, closing it down from China and then closing it down from Europe and then ultimately closing it down to the UK. So, and it was right about that time. But I'm not going to go out and start screaming, this could happen, this could happen. So, again, as president, I think a president has to be a cheerleader for their country. But at the same time I'm cheerleading, I'm also closing down a very highly infected place, specifically the location, as you know, in China that had the problems. And we're closing it down, but we close it down to all of China, then we close it down to all of Europe. Those were big moves, and it was right about that time.
Sir, just a quick follow-up, Mr. President.
Did you just
Mr.
learn
President?
about this today?
Say it?
You learned about the memo today? Just
I read about it maybe a day ago, 2 days ago.
Do you feel like someone among your staff or Peter Navarro himself should have told you about the memo
No, not at
earlier?
all. It was a recommendation. It was a feeling that he had. I think he told certain people in the staff, but it didn't matter. I didn't see it, but I did. I closed it down. I don't remember it even being discussed. We had a meeting where there were a lot of people. Most people felt they should not close it down, that we shouldn't close down to China, but I felt we had to do it. And that was at almost the exact same time as the memo.
If you had read the memo at the time, how would that have changed the steps you took or the
I don't
statements
think it would
that
have
you
changed
made?
because I did. I basically did what the memo said, and the memo was, the memo was pretty good memo from the standpoint that he took, I guess. I didn't see it yet.
He was saying that the U.S. warning that the U.S. could lose trillions of dollars and millions of lives.
Well, you're not going to lose millions of lives, but you'll lose plenty of money. But I couldn't have done it any better because it was about the same time, and I closed it down to China.
And just lastly, so you maintain confidence in him, in Peter Navarro?
Of course I maintain. He wrote a memo, and he was right. And I haven't seen the memo. I'll see it later on after this. But it didn't matter whether I saw it or not because I acted on my own. I guess I had the same instincts as Peter. Peter's a smart guy, and he's a good guy. And he's done a wonderful job. But he wrote a memo, and I guess he talked to various people about it. But ultimately, I did what the memo, more or less what the memo said, just about the time the memo came out. I closed it down. I took a lot of heat. The World Health Organization was very much against. They didn't like it. They actually put out statements about it. In all fairness to Joe Biden, he called me xenophobic. Like, I don't like China. I like China. I like the Chinese people are phenomenal people. So I was called xenophobic. I was called racist. How could I do a thing like this? Now, since then, Joe said that he was wrong, and he said that I was right. But I closed it down, and I was called names by some of the morning show hosts who don't have a clue what they're talking about. They're not smart people. And I was called all sorts of names when I closed it down to China. Now they try and hide that, the tape of them saying terrible things. but that was a great decision. If I didn't do it, if I didn't do that, we would have had hundreds of thousands more people dying. Yeah, please.
You talked a lot about the WHO, and I was wondering, Dr. Fauci had discussed them earlier, so if I could ask you a question about.
Well, he respects the WHO, and I think that's good, and he's worked with them for a long time. But they did give us some pretty bad play calling.
They've also, I think, given lots of countries in the world accurate coronavirus testing that's been central to your guys' data modeling, and so.
That I don't know. I can only say that with regard to us, they're taking a lot of heat because they didn't want the borders closed. They called it wrong. They really called, I would say, every aspect of it wrong.
So it's
until
the funding freeze
I'm
does
not happy
it
about it.
doesn't-
Look, we fund it. Take a look. I mean, go through step by step. They said there's no big deal, there's no big problem, there's no nothing. And then ultimately, when I closed it down, they actually said that I made a mistake in closing it down, and it turned out to be right. But at the time, they did that. So we're just going to take a look at it. We fund it, and they seem to be. I said recently in social media, I said they seem to be very China-centric. That's a nice way of saying it, but they seem to be very China-centric. And they seem to err always on the side of China. And we fund it, so I want to look into it. Yes, please.
Thanks. A quick follow-up on that. So is the time to freeze funding to the WHO during a pandemic?
No, maybe not. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but we're going to look at it.
You did say that.
We give a tremendous, no, I didn't. I said we're going to look at it. We're going to investigate it. We're going to look at it. But we will look at ending funding. Yeah, because you know what? They called it wrong. And if you look back over the years even, they're very much, everything seems to be very biased toward China. That's not right.
I wanted to follow up. You talked about African Americans and how they've been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus.
Seems to be, unfortunately.
Do you plan on requiring the CDC, any federal agencies or state agents, public places doing tests and private companies doing tests to collect that data on the race of the people being tested and the race of the people being treated and the outcomes?
Well, we're just seeing tremendous evidence that African Americans are affected at a far greater percentage number than other citizens of our country, because we're dealing with our country. Now we're looking at it from a worldwide standpoint. Tony Fauci is looking at it very strongly, but these numbers have started to come out, and they're very strong and they're pretty obvious. I mean,
You will
you're
release
talking
that,
about.
but you will release that
Seema,
publicly.
would you like to talk about that for a second, please?
I think one of the things that we're going to be doing with our Medicare data is to do that analysis. We're going to look back at the last month or so and look at, related type illnesses going forward. We now have a code for coronavirus, so we can actually stratify by demographic information, so we can look at race as a factor. We can also look at what the underlying health issues are as well. So we'll be providing that data very shortly, but we will be doing that analysis.
We're working on that very hard. This is something that's come up over the last, I hadn't heard this, and then over the last few days, this has come up more and more. And I don't mean by a little bit, I mean many times. It's a real thing. Now, we want to find cures, we want to find therapeutics, we want to find vaccines, because that will solve everybody's problem. But why is it that the African American community is so much, numerous times more than everybody else? And we want to find the reason to it. And Dr. Fauci, Seema, both of them, and others are working on this. And they're going to have very good, I would say in less than a week, I think you're going to have very good statistics. Couple of days.
Something specifically aimed at those communities that are being hard hit, those black communities.
Well,
that are
we're
being
helping
hard hit.
them a lot. But what's happening is we're trying to find out why is it that it's 3 and 4 times. Now, maybe that's not going to be the final number, but why is it 3 or 4 times more so for the black community as opposed to other people? It doesn't make sense, and I don't like it. And we're going to have statistics over the next probably 2 to 3 days, okay?
Mr. President,
Please. In the back.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question on behalf of myself and a colleague who couldn't be here due to social distancing. Thank you.
Who are you with? Who?
With Hearst Newspapers. I'm the print cooler today. Thank you. Some banks are only providing Paycheck Protection Program loans to clients with whom they have existing banking relationships. And you spoke to banking CEOs today. I wonder if you'll ask them, these lenders, to accept applications from all small businesses,
Sure.
not just the businesses with whom they have existing
Okay, they'll be doing that,
relationships.
but we're also working with small community banks, so they will be doing that. It's a question I've already spoken about. I mean, in many cases, they have long-term relationships with thousands of companies. I was amazed to see how many, you saw the number of applications. It's hundreds of thousands. It's a lot of work. But I did ask that question, and they are working on that. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question from a colleague is Congressman Jerry Connolly, a Democrat from Northern Virginia, told the local DC CBS station that you personally requested the CARES Act stimulus bill be stripped of $25 billion for the Postal Service. Connolly claims that unless the USPS gets that $25 billion, the agency will be run out of money by June. He accuses you of hastening the demise of the Postal Service. Could you respond to that, please?
I'm the reason the Postal Service has lost billions of dollars every year for many, many years. I'm the demise. This is the new one. I'm now the demise of the Postal Service. I'll tell you who's the demise of the Postal Service. So these internet companies that give their stuff to the Postal Service, packages, and I don't know why they're not, I don't run the Postal Service. You have a group of people, so-called independent people, and they run it. But these packages are, they lose money every time they deliver a package for Amazon or these other internet companies, these other companies that deliver. They drop everything in the post office. They say, you deliver it. And if they'd raise the prices by actually a lot, then you'd find out that the post office could make money or break even. But they don't do that, and I'm trying to figure out why. These are independent boards. They were appointed by other administrations. They're sort of long-term. They're there for a long time. And I've been talking to them also. You can look it up. Take a look. They have to raise the prices to these companies that walk in and drop thousands of packages on the floor of the post office and say, deliver it. And they make money, but the post office gets killed, okay? So they ought to do that, and we're looking into it, and we've been pushing them now for over a year. And you know that because you've seen the stories. I'm pushing them. It's not fair for them to these great, wonderful modern companies. They walk into our old post office with all these routes that could never be built. You could never build them. They go into areas that you could never do. And they say, here, deliver this. And they lose a lot of money per package. And they have to raise their prices, but this Postal Commission doesn't do it. Now, we just got a chance to appoint a couple of people onto the commission, as I understand it, and that's good. But they have to raise their prices, otherwise they're just going to lose a lot of money. And tell your Democrat friend that he ought to focus on that, because if he focused on that, he could truly save the post office. Post office has been losing billions of dollars a year for many, many years. And have him take a look at that, because that's the way to solve the problem.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much. Mr. President, you say this week will be very painful, very difficult, but a few weeks ago you say this was just like a flu. What have you learned?
I didn't say 2 weeks ago it was a flu.
The question is, Mr. President, what have you learned that
Ready?
you could offer as an advice to foreign leaders who still are skeptical about this pandemic and who are against social distancing? What is your advice? What have you learned?
I said it was just like a flu. So the worst pandemic we ever had in this world was a flu. And it was called, it was in 1917, 1918. And anywhere from 50 to 100 million people died. That was a flu, okay? So you could say that I said it was a flu, or you could say the flu is nothing to sneeze at.
Then what can you offer as an advice to foreign leaders who are skeptical about this pandemic and who are against social distancing?
Well, I think there aren't too many of them. If you look throughout the world, and everyone, just about everyone that has practiced that is now closing up. Well, the UK was an example. Now, they talk about Sweden, but Sweden is suffering very gravely. You know that, right? Sweden did that. The herd, they call it the herd. Sweden's suffering very, very badly. It's a way of doing it, but everybody has been watching everybody else. And so far, almost every country has done it the way we've done it. We've chosen to do it. If we didn't do it that way, we would have lost hundreds of thousands of more people. Okay.
Mr. President, there's voting going on today in Wisconsin. There were reports of thousands of people waiting in hours-long lines as they've had to weigh their own personal health and their civic responsibility. Do you think that the Supreme Court was right in its decision that voting should go forward and the absentee extension should not take place?
Yeah. Look, the Supreme Court, of course they were right, because what the Democrats wanted, and you know what this happened. I supported a man named Justice Kelly, who's Daniel Kelly, highly respected justice. And I supported him just the other day, social media. I know of him. He's just a fantastic justice. And I endorsed him. And as soon as I endorsed him, they wanted to move the election. They didn't want to move the election. As soon as I endorsed him, the Wisconsin Democrats say, oh, let's move the election to 2 months later. They didn't mind having the election until I endorsed him, which is very interesting. And now they talk about, oh, safety, safety. Well, it was 15 minutes after I put out an endorsement that they said we have to move the election. They didn't want to move the election before that. The other thing they wanted to do, which is crazy, at the end of the election, they wanted to have 1 week for proxies to come in or mail ballots. Now, mail ballots, they cheat, okay? People cheat. Mail ballots are a very dangerous thing for this country because they're cheaters. They go and collect them. They're fraudulent in many cases. You got to vote. And they should have voter ID, by the way. You want to really do it right. You have voter ID. But the Democrats, and this was turned over in the Supreme Court yesterday, I give great credit to the court, they actually didn't want to have an election day. They wanted to have election day, and then a week after election day, you choose all these ballots come in, these mailed ballots come in. The mailed ballots are corrupt, in my opinion, and they collect them, and they get people to go in and sign them, and then they're forgeries in many cases. It's a horrible thing. And so what happened is the Democrats in Wisconsin, they had no problem with the election being today until I endorsed the Republican candidate, Justice Kelly, Daniel Kelly. And as soon as I endorsed him, they went crazy. They went crazy. And you know that's true. And now all of a sudden, because go back 2 weeks, go back 2 days, they didn't want to move the election. They were having the election. They were fine because they thought they were going to win the election. Then I endorsed him, and all of a sudden they think they're not. Now I understand there are lines that go back a long way. I hope they're going to vote for Justice Kelly. Okay.
Mr. President, do you think that Americans got to choose?
With millions of pills of hydroxychloroquine donated, is there a plan or system in place to track the potential side effects?
Well, you saw the representative.
Serious harm. So is there a plan to track the side effects?
The side effects are the least of it. You have people dying all over the place, and generally the side effects are really with the Z-Pak, having to do with the heart. The Z-Pak, that's the antibiotic, not with the hydroxychloroquine. So a woman last night, I watched her on one of the shows, good show, Laura, and she was. She thought she was dead. She was a representative from Michigan. She was just in horrible shape for 12 days, 14 days. She thought she was dead. I think she said that her doctor said it's going to be very tough. She saw me talking about this, and she asked her husband to go to the drugstore. Now, this is a Democrat representative, a person that, perhaps wouldn't be voting for me. I think she'll be voting for me now, even if she's a Democrat, even if she's a Democrat representative. And they went to the store, which I made available because we have millions of doses. We have, I think, 29 million doses of this drug. And she asked her husband, she said, please go out. I'm not going to make it. Please, you have to hear her story. Please go out, get it. He went at 10 o'clock in the evening to the drugstore. He got it. He gave it to her. Now, it's I don't say it works like this at all. 4 hours later, she awoke, and she said, I feel better. And then shortly thereafter, she felt great. This is a woman that thought she was going to die. She's a Democrat representative, highly respected woman. African-American woman. I don't know if you saw it. As you asked a question about African-American, she was an African-American woman, a great woman. Her manner of speaking, the way she told the story was beautiful. I asked my husband to go and get it. He got it. She is now okay. I mean, she was interviewed last night on television. And she thanked me. She thanked me even in a tweet. She said, I want to thank President Trump. He saved my life. Look, I don't say that happens with everybody, but that's a beautiful story. There are many of those stories. And I say, try it. Okay, please.
Can you track this?
I mean, if you're in trouble, if you're going to die, and you're going to die, I mean, you're not going to die from this pill. Now, there could be some side effects, but the side effects is really more so from the
Track
Z-Pack.
those side effects?
No, doctors have to recommend it. I want doctors. I'm not saying, I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying we hear great results. And some people say, let's go to a laboratory, let's test it for a couple of years. And no, we got people dying in this country and all over the world right now, not in a couple of years. They're dying, as we speak, there are people dying. And I really think it's a great thing to try, just based on what I know. Again, I'm not a doctor. And I say, get a physician's approval. And they have physicians in these hospitals, great physicians, brave physicians. They also say it's good for the hospital workers to take them, that it's, keeps it away, keeps it out of your system. I don't know. But there's a lot of good examples. And, we have a 1,500 case study going in New York, and it's almost complete. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
But I appreciate that woman. She was great. You have to see it to believe it. The way she spoke, it was like a miracle. And this was not a fan of mine, but she's a fan of mine now, and I'm very honored by it. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Can you talk about your decision to remove Glenn Fine from the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee? And does that move and some of the criticism you've leveled at IGs, how does the American public have confidence that there'll be oversight?
Well, we have a lot of IGs in from the Obama era, and as you know, it's a presidential decision. And I left them largely. I mean, changed some, but I left them. But when we have, reports of bias, and when we have different things coming in, I don't know Fine. I don't think I ever met Fine. I heard the name.
It wasn't an Obama.
I heard the name. I don't know where he is. Maybe he was from Clinton. Okay, you check that out. Okay, maybe he's from Clinton. But we did change him. But we changed a number. We have about 7 nominations in, I believe. We put 7 very, very highly qualified people for the IG position. And, that's a decision that I could have made 3 years ago, and I could have made 2 years ago. And but we're putting in, not so much for him, we're putting in 7 names. I think it was 7, and they're going in now. Yeah.
Mr. President,
when you talk about the WHO being China-centric, what exactly are you talking about? Is it because China is underplayed how many
I
victims
don't know.
they've
They
had?
seem to come down on the side of China. Don't close your borders to China. Don't do this. They don't report what's really going on. They didn't see it, and yet they were there. They didn't see what was going on in Wuhan. They didn't see it. How do you not see it? They didn't see it. They didn't report it. If they did see it, they must have seen it, but they didn't report it. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, just turning back to the voting in Wisconsin and those long lines, who will be responsible and who should be held responsible if people get sick after they voted?
Look, all I did was endorse a candidate. I don't know anything about their lines. I don't know anything about their voting. I love the state.
But you also encourage
I
people to
won
get out
the
and vote
state.
today as well. Will you take some of the responsibility if some of those
I
people
won the
get
state,
sick?
which is rare for a Republican to do, but I won the state of Wisconsin. I'm going to win it again because we've been great to the people of Wisconsin, as you know, with our policies, and they like me and I like them. But all I did was endorse a candidate that's highly qualified, very respected person, and all hell broke loose as soon as I did that. And then all of a sudden they want to change. Before I endorsed them, they didn't want to change this voting area. There was no problem with the Democrats voting until I endorsed the candidate. Then they said, let's move it 2 months. Let's move it 3 months later. Safety, 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 right? All of a sudden they want safety. Well, before I did the endorsement, they didn't talk about safety. It was fine for months. For months, it was fine. It was always going to be. And now I endorse, and they want safety. So, that sounds...
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, how does the election, them holding this election in Wisconsin line up with the social distancing recommendations that have come from your
Well, there you
administration?
have to ask the people that you have a Democrat in Wisconsin as governor. Ask him. That's his problem. Okay, he should be doing it. Again, some governors fail, and I won't let them fail because when they fail, I'll help. But that's run by Democrats right now. Okay, it's run by Democrats. You had a great
Is
Republican.
it possible to socially distance when you're voting? You're going to have crowds.
You have to speak to
you're
the
gonna have
governor. What you should do is call the governor of Wisconsin and ask him that question. But also ask him, how come it was okay to do this until I endorsed the candidate? And as soon as I endorsed him, these lines are formed, and I hear, Mike, the lines are through the roof. So, hopefully they're going to vote for the right candidate. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can I just check in on oil again today? I was wondering if...
Oil?
Yeah. if
Where
there's-
is it today?
Well, I was wondering if you...
No, where's the price? Give me the price.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
How can you ask a question when you don't know the price?
I'll look it up for you.
Okay, let me do somebody else then. Go
So,
ahead.
so you were highly critical of mail-in voting, mail-in ballots for voting.
think mail-in
a few minutes
voting
ago,
is
but
horrible.
you voted by
It's
mail
corrupt.
in Florida's election last month, didn't you?
Sure, I could vote by mail for that.
How do you reconcile
Because I'm
that?
allowed to. Well, that's called out of state. You know why I voted? Because I happen to be in the White House and I won't be able to go to Florida to vote.
the
But let me
difference
just
between
say,
mailing within
well, there's a
state or
big
mailing
difference
outside
between
state?
somebody that's out of state and does a ballot and everything sealed, certified, and everything else. You see what you have to do with the certifications. And you get thousands and thousands of people sitting in somebody's living room signing ballots all over the place. No, I think that mail-in voting is a terrible thing. I think if you vote, you should go. And even the concept of early voting is not the greatest because a lot of things happen. But it's okay. But you should go and you should vote. I think you should go and you should vote. You look at what they do where they grab thousands of mail-in ballots and they dump it. I'll tell you what, and I don't have to tell you, you can look at the statistics. There's a lot of dishonesty going along with mail-in voting, mail-in ballots.
You've encouraged state officials to buy their own medical equipment. The federal officials are kind of swooping in and scooping up those orders. How are
That's
you
not right.
ensuring that it's
I've
being
been hearing that
distributed
so long.
fairly? And is there
Well, we're
more
getting
transparency?
great prices on equipment. We're getting great prices on equipment, and we're helping the states. And the governors are very thankful. Mike Pence had a call yesterday with every governor was on the call, and it was like a love fest. They're very happy. I don't know if they tell that to the press. Some of them don't. Some of them will never say good to the press, but they know we've done a great job. Not a good job, a great job.
Are you saying it's not happening? Because state officials are widely
No,
saying
no, I
that.
think sometimes it does. And what we say is, let us know, and we will immediately drop out of the bidding. Let us know, and we do that, and we drop out. Sometimes we tell them to drop out because we've got a good price. And then we'll deliver it to them.
How do you ensure it'll be
President,
fairly
one
distributed?
colleague.
Yeah, go ahead, behind, please. Go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you, Mr. President.
No, not you. In front, please. Yeah.
Some states have had trouble with getting accurate death counts, particularly because of lack of testing or no uniform.
Did you see death counts?
Yes, because of lack of testing and no uniform system
I
to
don't
put
know.
that into.
When you say death counts, I think they're pretty accurate on the death count. Somebody dies, I think the states have been pretty accurate.
But if there's no testing.
That's a big deal, what you're just saying. No, the death counts, I think they're very, very accurate. I do say this, I think if you look at China and if you look at some of these very large countries, when you talk about cases, number of cases, I would be willing to bet they have more cases than we do, but they don't do the testing like we do. But you look at, you look at some of these certain countries, and I would be willing to bet a lot that they have more cases. But we're more accurate, and our testing is done very accurately, and we've got a good process. Did you have one? Yes, please.
Mr. President,
OAN.
you have been very consistently supportive of a payroll relief tax. And I
what,
know that-
payroll?
Payroll relief. Now, I know you're still busy trying to implement
Right.
phase 3, but as we move towards phase 4,
Yeah.
are there still obstacles to that? Because that would put money in American pockets, like
Yeah,
consistently.
you're right. I would love to see a payroll, good questions. I would love to see a payroll tax cut. And I think on behalf of the people, it would be quick. Now, it's a longer term, it's a longer time because it's over a period of a year or whatever you want to make it. But I would love to see a payroll tax cut. There are many people that would like to see it as a permanent tax cut, payroll tax cut.
stopping it from?
Well, the Democrats right now are stopping it.
What are their reasons?
I don't know, I don't know, if maybe they think it's good politics to stop it, but you'd get a lot of people, a lot of money immediately. The payroll tax cut would be a great thing for this country. I would like to have it regardless of this, but this would be a fantastic time to have the payroll tax cut. The Democrats are stopping it, but I don't think they're, I think there's a certain flexibility. I think it's something that we should do, both for business and the people. But this would get money into the hands of small business immediately, money in the hands of people, the workers and people immediately, and it would be over an extended period, and it would be simple to do. It's so easy to do. It's a great tax cut, and I'd love you to speak to the Democrats and let's get it done. So I'm going to give this now to Vice President Pence, and they're going to go over some very good statistics with everybody, and we'll have a couple of answers on that because we're working very hard on the African American community with respect to what's going on because it's not good. I don't like it. And we're going to have some very good statistics, Tony, I think, over the next couple of days. So thank you all very much. Thank you.